in Scotland's future. The TAM election phone-in. 0845 500 1152. Talk directly to Scottish Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. Tayside and Fife's TAM.
Good morning and welcome to the first Leaders Phone-In of the 2011 Holyrood election campaign. I'm Colin Mackay and joining me is Scottish Liberal Democrat leader Tavish Scott. He's here to take your calls for the next hour on 0845 500 1152. If you've got an election question or query for the Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott, phone now on 0845 500 1152. Good morning, Tavish.
Morning, Colin.
Before we go to the calls, I want to ask you one quick question. This week we heard that Nick Clegg cries to music. What makes you cry? Is it Nick Clegg?
That's a quick question. I'll have to think about the answer.
We'll come back to it if you want.
Nick Clegg doesn't make me cry. He grimace occasionally, but not cry. Not cry. No.
Is he one of your biggest drawbacks in this election? The fact that you've gone in with the Tories down south, is that a problem for you?
It's certainly a challenging perspective. Yes, it's a difficult one, but we've got to front that up. We've got to make sure that we get across to people that there are some good things happening, like taking Scots out of tax. I think that helps people on the lowest level of incomes. But sure, it's a tough election. I don't doubt that at all.
So if it goes wrong, is he to blame?
Well, I'm not going to play the blame game. That's the easiest thing to do in politics. I'm leading
not
a party
until afterwards, at least.
That's right. But I'm leading a party in Scotland, so I think casting around to blame someone else is just not the right thing to do.
Right, let's take some calls. 0845 500 1152 if you want to put your question to the Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. First up is Kieran Fraser from the Highlands. Kieran, what's your point to to Tavish Scott this morning? Hello, Kieran.
Morning, Colin. Morning, Tavish.
Good morning.
I will say, first of all, I agree with Nick, so let's see if I agree with Tavish.
Go on then, what's your question for him?
I want to know, do you agree that there should be a single national police force in Scotland?
I don't think a single national police force will help us at all in Scotland. I think we'd lose police officers in your part of the world, in the Highlands, and we'll certainly lose them right across the country. The chief constables across the country say that we could lose 3,000 officers, and I think it's more important to keep those police officers helping communities right across the country than it is to lose those police officers, and I just don't believe a single police force is a good idea from lots of perspectives, but the main one is that it would mean the police constables say losing police officers.
Kieran?
Yeah, I agree with Tavish.
You agree with Tavish, you agree with Nick, you agree with Tavish. Tavish Scott, tell me though, do you think that the police have to save money?
Yes, we've all got to save money, and I think there are ways in which the police can do that. Indeed, they're already doing that across the forces, and I believe the services can do that. Indeed, the recent government report shows that they can do that. So I think there's concrete ways in which they can save money, but I don't believe cutting police officers is a good way to achieve anything.
Would the other parties' plans to amalgamate the forces into one Scottish-wide forces, wouldn't that save more money potentially?
No, I don't think it would, because it would cut the number of police officers, and there are some costs built into that process anyway. And as you and I know, the Labour government down in London pulled a proposal to cut police reorganisation because it was going to cost £400 million. And all the arguments before that proposed reorganisation was it would save money. So every time people like me suggest we should reorganise, I think the public should take a big step backwards and say, well, every time you do reorganise, it costs more money. So I'm not convinced on this one.
0845 500 1152 if you want to put your question to Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. John Bissett's on the line from Dundee. John, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
A very good morning, Colin.
Good morning.
And a very good morning, Tavish.
A very good morning to you.
This is a two-part question, Tavish. Is there any truth in the matter of over 60 bus passes being scrapped in Scotland? What does the Lib Dem say on this matter, please?
We would keep bus passes for people who've already got them. I think it's been an improvement for older folk in terms of getting around the country, but undoubtedly we're going to have to change the eligibility, in other words, who can use that bus pass in the future. But I'm very clear that for people who already get the bus pass with the Liberal Democrats, they'll keep that entitlement.
So someone who's 62 at the moment would keep their bus pass, but someone who turns 60, if you were in government just afterwards, wouldn't get their bus pass.
That's right. We're going to have to change it because we need to save some money.
How much would it save?
Well, it would save over the course of our Parliament. We estimate some tens and tens of millions of pounds, and that's an important.
That's not very specific. How much would it save?
Well, the costings depend on exactly how you draw the eligibility, Colin, and that's how we'll do it. But and there have to be some discussions with bus companies and others in order to do that properly. But I think the principle is very important, that we keep those people in bus passes, as it were, who already get them, and we do need to make some savings for the future.
John?
Yes, the second part of the question, I think, is very important for Scotland, and this one, Tavish. The dumping of tonnage of fish, fish that's dead, back into the sea by fishermen are not being allowed to land all their catch. Do you not think this is madness?
Yeah, I do, John. I discussed it actually with a fisherman at home in Shetland just yesterday on the pier, and his argument was very simple. If we could, or rather if the industry could land all that they catch, then we'd be able to sort out a sensible approach to the fishing industry's financial success, but also stop what is a scandal, the dumping, as you say, of fish back into the sea, dead fish back into the sea. That doesn't help any of us, doesn't help the fishing boats, doesn't help fish in the marketplace or in fish and chip shops where most of us buy it, and I think that's a policy that's got to change for the future, both for the fishing industry themselves, but also for fish stocks in the long term as well. Yeah.
0845 500 1152 to put your call to Tavish Scott, the Lib Dem leader. Lindsay Ward, another caller from the Highlands. Lindsay, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
Oh, hello. Yes, I'd like to know if Tavish Scott believes that the policy of industrialising the Highlands with inefficient wind farms is correct. And recent studies published by the John Muir Trust and reports from the Renewable Energy Foundation in London say that not only do wind farms are not producing what the developers say, but also as a country it's costing us billions in subsidies that we can't afford.
Tavish, are they inefficient?
It does depend where they are. I suppose it's all about what's your definition of inefficient. Are they unsightly? For many people they are. Do they provide us with cheaper energy? Well, none of us have seen that yet. I think one of the big tests for all of us, no matter where we live, in the Highlands or anywhere else in Scotland, is does a wind farm actually bring your electricity prices down? And no, it doesn't. We've all just seen our prices going up and up and up. And I think the big question about how we sort out our energy for the future is where does that power come from? Some of it will come from wind, but also what does it mean in terms of household bills? And I'm afraid in the Highlands, or where I live, in the islands, and indeed for most of Scotland, then our bills are going up at the moment. So is wind part of the solution? I'm sure it's part of the solution, but it's not the only answer.
Lindsay, what's your
Our
solution?
energy bills are going up because we're subsidising the developers to put these wind factories up. And I, for one, I'm really angry that I'm forced to pay extra on my energy bill for something that I don't believe is efficient. I mean, I don't like the look of them, but actually that is not the point. It's about the maths and the science, and it seems now that they are not efficient, and we shouldn't be doing it.
So what are the alternatives, Tavish?
Well, that's right. As Lindsay, I'm sure, studies, the alternatives are what we do already, which of course is a mix of gas, of coal-fired power stations, and also of nuclear. Now, none of those things are particularly popular either.
What would you do? Where would you stand on nuclear? Would you allow further nuclear development in Scotland, or would you block that?
I would certainly not allow new nuclear facilities to be opened in Scotland. I don't think that's the solution either, because as Lindsay's just made the point, we spend a huge amount of public money, taxpayers' money in Scotland already on some of these wind farm developments because of the subsidy scheme, but we do exactly the same with nuclear as well. And if we have to clean up nuclear, which we do, as we've seen unfortunately in Japan as well in recent weeks too, there's a huge clean-up bill, and you and I, the people of Scotland, face that cost. So I don't think that's the future either.
What about future redevelopment on existing nuclear sites? Would you allow that?
Well, I think that we've in terms of existing nuclear power stations, then making sure those continue has to be part of the mix. Yes, I don't think it's sensible or it would keep the lights on if we simply said close those nuclear power stations down. That doesn't seem to me a sensible policy. But I certainly don't believe that new nuclear power stations, which would cost hundreds of millions of pounds to build, and then we'd have the clean-up costs thereafter, is part of the solution.
And would you block some of the developments that Lindsay's talking about?
Well, I can't say whether I'd block them in the sense that I don't know about the specifics of the concerns that Lindsay has, but certainly there is a very strong argument for looking on a Scotland-wide basis at where wind farm developments are going, and also I think for some community involvement in those, and that's where the planning system should help, but also some financial return as well. The wind farms I know a little bit about at home, the argument they are being made is how do local people get some advantage of that, and I think that's part of it.
Thanks for your call, Lindsay. Next on the phones is Richard Pirrie from Maryhill in Glasgow. Richard, what's your point for Tavish Scott? Hello, Richard. Can you hear me, Richard? No, 0845 500 1152. I happen to know that Richard was going to ask you about the census. Did you fill your census in?
I did. I actually filled it in early. I don't know if that's a statutory offence, Colin, but
I think you get away with.
Do I get away with filling it in early?
I think you get away with filling it in early, given that you've got an election to fight. Tell me, how difficult is this election for the Liberal Democrats, given that you're trailing in the polls, given that you've had a few high-profile problems over the last week with candidates and former MSPs?
Well, you'd rather not have any of those problems, wouldn't you? I mean, I I'm not going to deny that's all tricky stuff to deal with. But I think as long as we can talk, as we have already this morning, about police and energy and how we deal with heating bills, although it's a bony day today, so it's maybe not quite such an issue. But on those kind of issues where we've got some clear ideas and some answers to the problems people are facing, then that's fine. When you get the chance to talk about things that matter to folk, then I'm very comfortable with the election. But on the politics, it's a wee challenge at the moment.
But is it difficult for the fourth party in Scotland to get into the debate when it looks so increasingly like a two-horse race in the opinion polls?
Well, the two-horse race between between Labour and the SNP seems to me about personalities, because you can hardly put a cigarette paper between the two of them on policy. They agree on everything. So I think the advantage I've got is having some different ideas about the things that matter to people, on jobs, on education, and that's what I'm determined to do during the campaign.
0845 500 1152 to put your point directly to Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. Myra Tregen's on the line from Kilmarnock. Myra, what's your point to Tavish Scott this morning?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to know that I live in Kilmarnock, and our nearest helicopter rescue team are at Gennet, HMS Gennet. And there's only one on the other side of the country. Why is it that one of them is being closed down? Isn't that going to make it more difficult for rescuers to do their job?
Well, Myra, I think you make a strong argument. I'm very concerned about the proposals that have come out of the UK government to change the way in which we provide air rescue services around the country. I'm sure the services you're describing near Kilmarnock are also important for local jobs, and I think that's a factor too. But it's absolutely right that we get these services set up in the right way to provide safety at sea, safety in the way in which they do. And I hope we can win that argument with the government on making sure the services continue, not just for local jobs, but I think very importantly for the services they provide.
Is it difficult given that issues like that are actually reserved matters and you can really only lobby?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Scottish Parliament doesn't have some of these responsibilities, but I think we can make a Scotland case, a Scottish case, as to why these emergency services are really important, and we'll do that. We are doing that, yeah.
Given that your colleagues at Westminster are in government, how much attention do they pay to you when you lobby on that?
Well, they know about this one because, as Myra well knows, it's not just about the helicopter services, it's also about the Coast Guard stations around the Scottish coast, and those are important too. There's one threatened here in the Glasgow area, down the Clyde, and I think there are very strong arguments as to why those should be kept, because we're a maritime nation. It's not just the winter time when big ships are going past the coast, it's the summertime when there's lots of small pleasure craft as well.
But how much clout do you have with your Westminster colleagues on issues like that, on issues like the potential closure of either Lookers or Lossiemouth? How much clout do you have there?
Well, I can just make the argument, and the argument is stronger in Scotland if on some of these issues where all the politicians agree, or most of the politicians agree, we make a firm Scottish argument. I think
So you don't have any clout at all, given the fact that they are your party colleagues in government at Westminster?
Obviously, I try to make the argument, and they'll listen or they'll not listen. I'm not going to overstress or underplay it. I just think all I'm really arguing is that where the Scottish card can be played on a cross-party basis, I think that argument's always stronger, and that's what, after all, we've done on RAF bases at Lookers and at Lossiemouth.
So actually, you need the support of the other parties to have some clout with your own party at Westminster?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it helps hugely if all the parties come together to work constructively, and I also think people expect us to do that on issues where there's a very clear Scottish case to be made.
But it does make it sound like you don't have any clout as leader of the Scottish Party with your colleagues at London.
Well, I mean, I can make the argument, but what I'm just not going to do, Colin, is suggest that just because I say it, they're automatically going to listen to it. I think I'd frankly be ridiculous.
We're going to get another call in before we have a wee ad break. Anne Gourley from Newport is on the line. Anne, what's your question to Tavish Scott this morning?
Hello, Tavish.
Morning.
It's to ask you, what are the Liberal Democrats going to do to safeguard sheltered housing in Scotland? We had an excellent facility 20 years ago. Now they've taken the care out of it, and people feel insecure and vulnerable, and in fact some sheltered housing are not even being allocated.
Well, the sheltered housing I know best about in my own part of the world is a very important service for local people, and we make sure that the council can make the right kind of allocations to it. In other words, put people in it who really need it. So you'll need to tell me, Anne, but I suspect this is a local function for your local council, and national politicians, as it were, shouldn't get in the way. But I do think it's very important that there is a stock of local sheltered housing in your area, and that people can therefore access it. But if there's a particular problem in the way in which, I don't know, national regulations are working, I'm more than happy to take that up, because I appreciate strongly how important this can be for local folk.
Or is this a more general problem, Anne, with cuts?
Yes, it's both local authority and in the private sector. Wardens were able to provide a degree of care to people, assist them, and all that's been stopped, not helped by the Care Commission. But what we've got is people in sheltered housing feeling very vulnerable, the people that are in, and some people that would like to come in, there isn't the care available. I mean, you're just getting a call in the morning, whereas we used to have activities, good backup if there was an emergency, and please don't think that I'm making this a local issue. This seems to be happening throughout Scotland, and as I say, within local authority and the private sector and voluntary sector. What will Liberal Democrats do to safeguard the people that are in and existing, the facilities that we have presently in Scotland that are not being utilised and could be if a warden was allowed to do a wider remit?
Yeah, I think, Anne, you make a very strong argument as to why we should make sure there is money allocated to this service, and that between national and local government, the area you're in does have enough support to provide this. I think your point about the wardens is very strong indeed. And if it's a case of monies not being available, cuts, in other words, as Colin rightly observes, then I think that's an issue we've got to get to grips with, because ultimately, in the current situation we're in, it is about the priorities that are important and how the judgments are made as to whether to invest in, as you rightly say, sheltered housing or something else. And I think that's the kind of decision that people are having to make.
Well, what decision do you make on that? Given the cuts we're facing, we can't support everything that we've been paying for the last few years, can we? Where do you draw where do you make the cuts?
Well, that's right. That's why we've been arguing for example, the top pay in the public sector to be reduced, and why we've made some other proposals in our manifesto in terms of trying to make some savings. Because I appreciate on sheltered housing for Anne or for other people around the country, these are really difficult situations, and we've got to do our best to make sure that the right priorities are dealt with when they really matter to local people.
This is the Scottish Election Leaders Phone in. Lib Dem boss Tavish Scott is taking your calls this morning on 0845 500 1152.
Colin Mackay with Scottish Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. The TAM election phone-in. 0845 500 1152. Have your say in Scotland's future. Tayside and Fife's TAM.
It's a beautiful Scottish day for Heather to be walking her little terrier, Bobby.
So it is, Brian.
This is strange. After listening to a message on her phone, the old lady stopped and picked up wee Bobby.
Aye, she seems to be protecting the little fella.
This explains it, Davy. From nowhere, a passing van's lost its hubcap and it's rolling its speed. And yes, it sliced through the air where little Bobby was.
Brilliant anticipation.
Life doesn't always give you advance warning, but Floodline can. For free advance flood warnings direct to your phone, call 0845 988 1188 or visit floodlinescotland.org.uk.
Right now at Struan Peugeot, we've got a limited number of the latest 11-plate 308s with delivery mileage saving up to a whopping 5050 off list price. For example, we've 308S diesels that deliver up to 74 mpg with £35 road tax for just $13,995. That's over $3,800 off the RRP. So for fantastic deals on the biggest choice of Peugeots, it has to be Struan Peugeot, Crieff Road, Perth, or online at struans.co.uk.
The Sterling Spring Collection has been unveiled at Sterling Emporiums across Scotland. There are fabulous dining sets, chic sofas and simply divine beds and bedroom furniture. Did I mention the stunning prices? And up to 3 years interest-free credit. The Sterling Spring Collection, now online and in-store at Sterling Furniture, South Road, Dundee. Furnishing every moment of every day. Representative 0% APR.
It's back, and it's even bigger. Tay's Got Talent. With more heat than last time, meaning more chances to be a £1,000 winner. Go to tayam.co.uk or pick up the Evening Telegraph now to find out about a Tay's Got Talent heat near you.
You are fabulous.
Plus, stay listening to Tay AM or check the telly for up-to-the-minute info and photos.
Absolutely brilliant.
Tay's Got Talent is back from March 24th with Coca-Cola, Park Leisure and Tay AM.
This is the TAM election phone-in. Talk directly to Scottish Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. 0845 500 1152. Join the debate with the party leaders. Tayside and Fife's TAM.
0845 500 1152 to put your point directly to Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott this morning. Trevor Glass is on the line from the Borders. Trevor, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
Hello, it's Trevor here. I tell you what it is, I work for Scottish Water, and I listened to his manifest the other day on the television and that. He was doing the borders.
What did you make of it? Because he's planning to private or to sell off the debt, not privatise the debt. Sell off.
Glad
the
you clarified
debt.
that there, Colin.
Well, some people argue that it's a step towards privatising. Trevor,
really,
what's your point?
I don't think we've got any debt.
You don't think Scottish Water's got any debt?
No, well, it's what happened with the English companies. All their debt was sold off. Scottish Water seem to have adopted all the debt from the councils and like East of Scotland Water, West of Scotland Water and everything. So why did that not disappear when we went to Scottish Water?
Good question, Trevor, but it does exist, so we're trying to find a way to make sure that we get it out of the company, and the company's still got the money it needs to invest both in your job but also in the water systems we need right around Scotland, including, of course, on the borders. But what we're doing is, we hope, creating an income stream which will help spend money on lots of things that really matter in terms of jobs and keeping the economy moving.
By your calculations, that debt that Trevor's not convinced by is about £2.75 billion.
Well, it's actually not my calculations, it's the government's calculations,
okay,
the Scottish government's
calculations.
So, yeah, it
but
exists, unfortunately.
If you privatise that debt, doesn't that then lead to some kind of privatisation of the company?
No, it doesn't at all. It's a very... I mean, if we want to privatise a company, that's what would be happening. But no one's arguing for that, least of all me. I don't think that would be the right thing to do. Nor are we arguing for mutualisation, which is another of the options. This is just about the debt, and it means the company stays in public ownership, in public hands. It's a Scottish company owned by all of us, and that's what will continue to happen. But I think it's a good thing that the Scottish Government commissioned an independent budget review. It came up with one of these options, this option that we're proposing, and I think it's the right way to both help the company, make sure the company continues to operate successfully in Scotland, but also make sure we've got some money to spend around Scotland in the economy for kids from tougher backgrounds in some of the areas we want to do.
08455 500 1152 to put your calls directly to Tavish Scott. We'll even see if we can make him answer them all. Edward Carew's on the line from Edinburgh. You're a politician. You're a politician. Edward Carew, what's your point for Tavish this morning?
My point is, what do you do about the police coming up with a disabled person with a neighbour telling lies, and the person got charged for it and got done for it at court and had to pay £300 fine?
Well, what's wrong with having to pay a fine for doing something wrong in court, Edward?
I've never done it in court.
Oh, is this you?
Yes.
Ah, right. Tavish, do you think people are being made to pay too much in fines in court?
It depends, obviously, on what they've been charged with, and I don't think politicians should probably start interfering with the court system. That would be probably a slippery slope to a different kind of world we would live in. So, obviously, Edward's in a difficult situation, but I'm not going to second-guess the sheriff who must have judged on whatever happened.
Yeah, some of your opponents seem to be trying to get in on the court scene in this election. For example, the Labour Party and the Tories want mandatory jail sentences for knife crime. How would you approach that?
Well, it won't work. I mean, no one should carry a knife around Scotland. We can all obviously agree to do that, to agree on that point, but I don't think mandatory sentence will work. And not just I, but even today, in today's papers, senior police officers, people who know about how to tackle knife crime, are saying this policy will not work. It'll just mean people who carry knives continue to carry knives.
If after the election you're in a position to negotiate any kind of coalition in the Scottish Parliament, would something like that be a deal breaker for the Liberal Democrats?
Well, I just think we need to, on that one, it's an important, really important area, we need to have policies that'll work, and this one won't. And in addition to that, neither the Labour or the Conservative Party can tell us how many more Barlinis they'd have to build, put all these people in prison. So it's not just about a policy introducing a new sentence and then making sure that sentence actually happens. It's also the consequences of that policy, which mean more and more people in jail. And if you can't say where the prisons are going to be, or how you're going to build them, or how you're going to pay for them, I don't think that's a very honest approach.
So you could never agree to something like that, though, could you?
I don't think it'll work. So it just doesn't seem to me a sensible policy. No, I wouldn't agree with it. No.
So that would be a deal breaker in a coalition talk?
I just don't think we should try and have policies that don't work. And senior police officers in Strathclyde say that policy would mean that we would lose the good work that's going on, for example, in the Strathclyde High Crime Prevention Unit. And I just don't think that's a policy that would be good for Scotland, because it wouldn't work.
Are you arguing that that would actually make the situation worse then?
Well, it certainly isn't going to cut reoffending. If we all want to stop people carrying knives on around Scotland, which is a sensible thing to do, then let's concentrate on the parts of the armed answer which are working and which can continue to work, and all the evidence suggests that mandatory sentences, unfortunately, will not achieve what we all want to achieve.
Loads of calls coming in now. 0845 500 1152 to get your call direct to Tavish Scott. Kenneth's on the line from Edinburgh. Kenneth, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
Yeah, hi Scott. My contribution, I just want to ask Scott a question. Like for someone like me, I have a master's degree in environmental science from University of Aberdeen, but can't get a job. I'm working as a security guard. What help is it there for us? Are we not more or less like a forgotten generation because I can't do anything in environmental science? I graduated in 2008. So the only thing I'm doing is security, and you don't need a liar, what do you call it? A certificate to do security guard.
Tavish Scott,
what can I get?
What can you do to help people like Kenneth, who he's claiming is going to be a forgotten generation of graduates?
And that's a big concern. Kenneth's one of many people at the moment who I think we're all concerned about in terms of graduating from a Scottish university, in his case Aberdeen, and then not having a job to go to. And on science, and I hope it's something that might help him, we've got a particular set of plans around investments in science and working with the businesses who are creating jobs in this area, and I hope that he might be able to gain a position in one of those businesses.
Now, you're talking about keeping degrees free. How do you feel about university principals at the moment who are arguing that students should have to pay for their education and essentially then graduate with a pile of debt?
Well, I think university principals are over-egging the pudding at the moment. I think we're getting an awful lot of university principals saying you must do this. But what university principals need to get real about is their own institutions. And the fact is that we need, I think, to look at whether every degree in Scotland is a 4-year degree. Every course that we run is absolutely fit for purpose, and the universities are going to have to do some reforming as well. So I'm getting a wee bit frustrated by listening to lectures from university principals instead of them actually accepting that there's some things that are going to have to change in Scottish universities too.
Joan Fing's on the line from Aberdeen. Joan, what's your point to Tavish Scott this morning?
I'm ringing regardless of my brothers and sisters from in India, and all my children born in Scotland. I was born in Liverpool, and I'm living in Scotland for good now. And my children born in Scotland, my son, my daughter, and everybody, my brothers and sisters' families. Now, you know what I'm trying to say. These forms you're filling in, do you know what will give us to, do you know, where do we have to expand that? You know, why do all the families put on the form, or you just put yourself in and
I think Joan's asking you about the census, Tavish, and I'm not convinced that's something that you have to deal with, but just
it's
on
your Scotland form,
just on Joan's point there, do you think that Scotland, for example, is welcoming enough people from abroad?
Yes, I do, and I think we need to be to keep working on this so Joan and her family feel at home in Scotland, are part of Scotland and are Scotland. And I was involved in a very strong community campaign at home to keep a young lad from Thailand who was going to be deported. He was a very important part of my home community, and we as a community worked really hard to keep him when he was threatened with deportation. So I think we have a very different attitude to folk from outside our country than maybe exists in other parts of the world, and I want to make sure that's the kind of Scotland we are, a welcoming Scotland.
0845 500 1152. Tavish Scott will take any question and query you have for them this morning. 0845 500 1152. Fiona Hopper's on the line from Edinburgh. Fiona, what's your point to Tavish Scott this morning?
I really just want to know, we're hearing a lot from the Tories. Obviously, they've come out and said that they will charge students fees, and as a student myself, I'm kind of very keen to know what Tavish Scott thinks about that. Is it the case that only the Tories are really being honest with us about the way that higher education can be funded for the future?
No, I don't think giving students in Scotland another £16,000 of debt and the black hole that would be created in university funding with the Tory plans is the right way forward at all. I think we can and have had a Scottish approach to this now for 12 years since our Parliament was recreated in Edinburgh, and I think we can continue to do that. And most of the other parties do agree that the best way forward is to keep education free, make sure that it's based on the ability to learn, not on the ability to pay, and that's very much what I want to do as well. So I don't agree with the Tory approach, no.
Do you go along with the government figures of about £93 million shortfall that you would have to make up?
Well, that's the figure that, yes, has been produced by a working group involving the universities and the government and indeed the other political parties, and that seems to be the figure we should start from and work to meet, yes.
Fiona, what do you make of what Tavish has had to say to you this morning?
I mean, I think that's fair enough. I'm no economist, so I don't know about the figures. You know, I think students are interested in, you know, if you get the grades, can you go, and not being kind of so dependent on how much, your parents earn and how much they can afford. I certainly wouldn't want a place that's kind of, that has to go to a certain university because, they charge less fees when I want to go somewhere else. So, it's good to hear a party come out, but obviously we'll see if it's affordable in the future. But I hope that they do all work together to kind of, provide some solution.
Thanks for your call, Fiona. 0845 511 52. Norman Ewan's on the line from Dundee. Norman, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
Well, my point is that we have all these people going to university and we want free education, but it's the charge of the time wasters who are going to university and have no intention of completing it. The course, it's just in colleges as well.
Norman, do you think many kids go to university not expecting to complete their degree?
Yeah, I've seen them. I've been to university myself. They're there for the socialising and they kind of put their work in on time, and there seems to be quite a bit of that. They should be charged for time wasting rather than the people that are there for 4 years who fully intend
I'm going to put that to
their
Tavish then, Norman. Tavish, should we target the dropouts?
Well, we certainly need to target the dropouts in the right way and find out why they're dropping out of university and why they're not persevering with their studies. Because when we do have less money and we do have to meet the funding gap that Fiona was describing earlier on, I do think there's going to be a greater onus on all of us, and particularly the universities, to get this one right. So Norman's got a point. He expresses it very strongly, but he's got a point about why are kids leaving university after the first year.
Are too many people going to university at the moment?
Well, I think there is an argument about that, yes, and I think we need to make sure our colleges are really strong, because college courses and their ability to target what the needs of companies, businesses and skills in Scotland is a very important part of the overall mix. Not everyone wants to go to university.
So do we need to cut the number of university places?
Well, I don't know about the number of university places. We could sort Norman's point about people dropping out. That would be a good starting point. I would rather we looked at whether a 4-year degree is right for every course, because I think that's a better way forward. I think it's good to have a country where people aspire to go to university, but I don't think university is the be-all and end-all for every person. I have kids of my own. One's at university, one's not going to go to university, and I know for both of those, for both of my two in that sense, the decision should always be about what's the best route into what they want to do in the future, and that's not always university.
As a father who's going to have to pay, I suspect you're quite relieved that one of them isn't going to go.
Yeah.
Back to the calls, 0845 511 52. Margaret Armstrong's on the line from Castlemilk in Glasgow. Margaret, what's your point for Tavish this morning?
I realise that we're talking about a Scottish election here, but I really want to know why Mr. Tavish, I can't remember his full name, but anyway,
Tavish Scott,
why he thinks that the Scottish public should take his party seriously when they have totally sold out the whole country by getting into a coalition with the Tory government, which has literally turned our country, as in the UK, apart at the seams, and why he thinks that we should take him seriously.
Why should we take you seriously, Tavish Scott? Margaret asks these questions much better than I could.
No, it's an entirely fair question. Margaret's quite entitled to ask it, and let me try and answer it. I mean, I just think there are some things happening which are important, and I think taking people out of tax, people on the lowest levels of income across Scotland, that's happening right now from the 1st of April, helping people in those really difficult financial situations is a good thing, and I think that's happening because of our involvement in that government. Look, you've got to have a government, and I appreciate that for many people in Scotland, the Tories are not what they want, but ultimately people win elections and people don't win elections, and you've got to set up a government after that election's over with and try and deal with the pressures the country has.
But Margaret makes a very fair point in that this time a year ago, the Lib Dems were arguing against a rise in VAT. They were attacking the Tories for threatening that. You were against student tuition fees. You were attacking Labour and the Tories for that. Now your party at Westminster in power is doing both of those things, a complete volte-face.
Well, and if you had Nick Clegg here, Colin, he can answer all that stuff because he can explain why they've done that.
But he's your pal. You've got to answer for him in this election, surely.
Yes, I do, but I'm not going to answer for things that are A, not my responsibility, and B, we take a very different position. I mean, you've just raised the issue of tuition fees. As you well know, and as I hope Margaret knows as well, in Scotland there aren't any fees, and there haven't been any for 12 years because I voted to get rid of them, as did every Liberal Democrat in the Scottish Parliament. So our record on that is very clear, and yes, it is different from that down in London. But yeah, sure, it's a difficult situation, but I recognise the point that Margaret makes. But I just think if your challenge in life is to try and deal and help those, for example, on the taxation income, on the tax system that currently pay tax, and take people at the bottom out of that altogether, that's something a government should do, and they are.
Margaret, Tavish says he's different from Nick Clegg.
No, I don't believe so. I really, really don't believe so. I mean, I've listened to you speaking to everyone that's come on, and they've all had very pertinent points to give you. And the thing is, yes, these things are affecting these people in local areas, but it's as a whole what your party is helping the Tories to do to the United Kingdom, because we are still attached to the United Kingdom, although we have our own parliament that makes decisions and whatever.
Margaret, do you think Tavish has to distance himself completely from the Lib Dems down south?
Well, I think to be credible, I need to show that.
Tavish, do you have to do what Hugh Grant did in Love Actually and do a big public dissing of Nick Clegg? Is that what you need to do? You need to get him up here to campaign with you.
I mean, I understand the point, and isn't it the easiest thing to do just to say you don't agree with anything and throw blame and bricks over the wall, over Hadrian's Wall, and that's what some other parties are choosing to make this election all about. But look, I do agree with taking people out of tax. That's a change I think helps people. Well, I don't think it helps people. I know it helps people, and people have said that to me in this election campaign. And I appreciate for lots of folk it's not the right answer, and I won't satisfy them on that. But believe me, if you're some of the Scots being taken out of tax, or if you're a pensioner who's just seen the pension link between earnings and pensions put back in, which never happened under 13 years of Labour, or if you're someone who cares passionately about the locking up of asylum kids at Dungavel, which used to happen under Labour and now has been stopped, and I think that's a good thing, I think there are some changes which are sensible and right.
0845 500 1152. Stuart Ellis is on the line from Monifeith. Stuart, what's your point to Tavish Scott this morning?
Good morning, Mr. Scott.
Very good morning to you, sir.
You said that you're reducing council tax by £200 to £300. Is that for all pensioners?
You're confusing him with the Tories there, Stuart. I think what Tavish is talking about. Tavish is talking about helping out people who are earning less than £10,000. Is that right, Tavish?
Yeah, our proposal, Stuart, is to help pensioners who are on the lowest incomes, on £10,000 of income or less a year, and make sure that they are taken out of paying council tax altogether. We think it's better to target the very little public money we do have in Scotland to spend on important improvements on those who are at levels of income that are low, rather than targeting every pensioner, in the Tories' case, all the wealthiest pensioners. I don't think that's a good policy at all. It'd be lovely to do if there were loads of money, but there isn't. So I think we should try and make sure we help those most in need, and that's what we'll try and do.
How's that for you, Stuart?
Okay, that's fine. Just one other final point.
Go on then.
Can I ask your definition for a pension? What is a pensioner?
Well, a pension is defined, I hope I'm fair in saying this, by age in our current system, and that's those are the rules we operate to, yeah.
We're going to take one more call just before we have another wee break. Thanks for that. Morris Young is on the line from Edinburgh. Morris, what's your point to Tavish Scott this morning?
Hi, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Yes. Your party markets itself as a Liberal Democratic Party, or Liberal Democrat, actually. Most people would agree that a fundamental democratic right is the right to self-determination, but your party opposes that. You do not favour consulting the people. No, I can see.
Are you asking him about a referendum there, Morris?
Well, yes, I can see hypocrisy and duplicity in the Liberal Democrat Party. Where's the democracy?
Right, Tavish Scott, you didn't go into any kind of coalition talks with the SNP after 2007 election because then you said a referendum was a deal breaker. Is that still the case?
Well, it's just not being... I mean, I appreciate for Morris...
Morris is talking about it.
I was just about to say that. For Morris, it's very important. For the SNP, apparently, it's very important, although I've never heard Alex Salmond talking about it in his whole election campaign. Never mentions independence. If we want to debate about independence, let's have it. And if the SNP win the election with a majority of the seats, then they'll entirely deserve to get on with this, with independence, and because they would have a majority. That's what democracy is about. That's my democratic principle here, and that's the one I've always held to. But
if they stick to it, would it be a deal breaker again after this election?
Ask me after their manifesto. I don't know what they're going to say on this issue, Colin, but I've done
let's assume that they're sticking with the referendum because they've shown no indication that they won't, and it was in their conference speeches, just as you had various things that was in your manifesto and your conference speech. Would it be a deal breaker this time as it was in 2007?
Well, I don't know what's going to be in the SNP manifesto, so forgive me, until they say what their position is on independence and start talking about independence, I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to someone else's policy.
But even I can guess that it's going to be there.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be there or not, but we've done so many leaders' debates now. We're just about to do another one later on this morning, and Alex Salmond never mentions independence. So if it's a big issue for the SNP, let's have the debate. I'm very happy with that.
This is the Scottish election leaders phone-in. Lib Dem boss Tavish Scott taking your calls this morning for another 15 minutes. You've still got time to get your call in. 0845 500 1152.
Colin Mackay with Scottish Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. The TAM election phone-in. 0845 500 1152. Have your say in Scotland's future. Tayside and Fife's TAM.
Spring is here at Buick Furniture, and it's time to treat your home to a fresh new look for a whole lot less. We're proud to unveil our new spring collection of brand new designs and ranges, and to make way for new stock, we've got hundreds of great offers, including irresistible deals on sofas, dining and bedroom furniture, all with up to 3 years interest-free credit. So spring into action and visit Buick now for a fresh new look for a whole lot less. Buick Furniture, Charlton Road, Montrose. It's well worth the journey. Representative 0% APR.
Keep the kids entertained this Easter with Sky's 3D Kids Club and get them free tickets to some amazing 3D films. Sky TV customers can take up to 3 kids for free when they buy an adult ticket for just £3. There are 4 brilliant 3D films to choose from.
Oh, Shrek Forever After!
Go to sky.com/kids club to book tickets now.
Yeah.
Sky. Believe in better. Available at participating Cineworld cinemas only. Adult 3D glasses are 80p.
You can save some dough with a price that's low. But who you gonna call?
Crunch Busters!
Call Arnold's Crunch Busters today. We've got fuel saving, tax reducing, insurance saving, crunch busting deals on over 15,000 new and used cars. Get an 08 plate Volkswagen Passat 1.9 Highline from only $9,988. Bust the crunch. Visit arnoldclark.com.
Crunch Busters!
It's the longest street fair in Europe, so how can you miss it? The Links Market hits the Esplanade Kirkcaldy from the 13th to the 18th of April. How do you describe it? It's just more thrill rides, white knuckle rides, fun rides, stalls and loads of fun, whatever age you are. Fun? Try some at the Links Market on the Esplanade Kirkcaldy. Wednesday the 13th to Monday the 18th of April. It's miles and miles and miles of fun.
This is the TAM election phone-in. It's question time for the party leaders. Have your say on 0845 500 1152. Colin Mackay with Scottish Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott. Tayside and Fife's TAM.
Still 15 minutes to get your call to Tavish Scott, the Lib Dem leader, ahead of the election. 0845 500 1152 is the number to call to put your questions directly to him. Susan Melville's on the line from Fife. Susan, what's your question for Tavish Scott this morning?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a great-grandmother.
Good for you.
I feel strongly about the young people not getting any work. My great-granddaughter has tried and tried and tried. Is there anything can be done to get work for these young folk?
Susan, it's a really serious issue. We need to make sure that we do create work in Scotland, and
I know they get so disheartened.
They do, and I think it's a bit about hope, and it's also about practical measures to make sure the economy starts moving and jobs are created in Fife and across Scotland. And that's what we sought to do this last week, with some proposals on a range of investments in the economy to get the economy moving and to create work. And it's not going to be me who creates jobs, or any politician whoever wins this election. It's going to be folk working hard in their own businesses in Fife and across the country, and that's who we'll support to try and make sure they can take on more people.
Your manifesto pledged work experience for people, but no paid job there.
Well, we've got it again. We're back to the money. You were asking me about money earlier on, Colin. How do we make sure we spend money in the right areas? But we've got some investment proposals in terms of lending to business. In other words, in terms of how they create jobs, and those are the kind of measures we hope can start to make a difference right around the country. Fife being one of those areas.
Thanks for your call, Susan. We're going to speed through as many as we can the last 15 minutes. 0845 500 1152. Sam Gillespie's on the line from Paisley. Sam, what's your question for Tavish Scott?
The question is, when the poll tax was introduced, it was introduced first in Scotland, and we paid it up here, and all of a sudden, down in England, they complained about it, and they stopped it. Is there any chance the gentleman could find out what happened to the year's money I and a lot of other Scottish people paid and never got an answer for?
Clearly still rankles after all these years with Sam, Tavish Scott.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I think Sam makes a strong argument. We can certainly do what we can to find out where all that money went. It's your money and you paid it, and you feel strongly about it. And I think it's very fair that you get some straight answers to that. And that's why we have a parliament. We can initiate public inquiries.
For local services.
Well, that would be the answer. And
nobody's going to get that money back.
No,
now.
But if Sam wants an explanation, which I think is calling what he was arguing for, and I think that's entirely fair, I think he deserves it, and we'll get him one, yeah.
0845 500 1152 is the number to call to put your question directly to Tavish Scott, the Lib Dem leader. Iris Murphy's on the line from Dundee. Iris, what's your question to Tavish?
My question is for Tavish and all his candidates and all his colleagues. Do they really live in the real world? Are they waking up in the morning and does his wife ask him, where's the money coming from for this bill? I'm disabled, how can I get out? Do they really, really live in this world? Because they are spending so much of our tax-paying money on utter incomplete things that just don't have anything to do with us. And I'm so disgusted with every damn one of them.
Tavish, do you live in the real world?
Well, I spent 12 hours in the boat last night between Shetland... Oh, I'm sorry.
That must have been lovely. Look, I'm going to hang up because I am so irate listening to you and your candidates and your colleagues. You just spout just rubbish.
But thanks for phoning anyway, Iris. Tavish, finish your point.
Well, I was going to say, I met an awful lot of people on the boat last night who had exactly the same concerns as I, or at least maybe some of the same concerns as Iris about their living costs and how much it's costing to pay the bills, where that money's coming from, and the insecurity around their job at the moment. So I get that, and I understand the importance of that issue to every working family in Scotland. And Iris made a serious point, I thought, about how much money is spent on things that are lovely to do when there's loads of public money about, but we can't afford at the moment. So I think she was making, in her own inimitable fashion, a very strong argument.
But that tried and tested question to politicians at election time, do you know how much a pint of milk costs, or a litre of milk these days?
Yeah, a litre of milk, yeah. Well, it's 89p, I think, in my local shop at home, and it can vary up to, more than £1 in some other shops around
there we go.
We
proved that Tavish Scott does, at least for some of the time when he does the shopping, live in the real world. Politicians living in the real world shock. 0845 500 1152. Still time to get your call on. Stephen Mooney's in the line from Uddingston. Stephen, what's your point to Tavish Scott?
Hi, Tavish.
Morning, sir.
Morning. I've been listening to the programme this morning, and I've been interested at a number of points that Colin's made around, different policies that other parties are putting forward and what would be deal breakers for you if there was potentially a coalition. But rather than in a reaction to policies that other parties are putting forward, from your point of view, your manifesto, what would be a deal breaker for you to enter a coalition?
Good question.
No, and I'm pleased that, Stephen, you've put it that way around, because I tend to get asked the ones that Colin's asked, and you've put it the right way around. Look, I just want to make sure the full economy is based on how we create jobs, what we do to make sure our education system's working really hard for you and for your family, and also how we keep important local services local. And I just think those are the three important themes that we can talk about in this election campaign and try and make some progress on. And I hope other parties will agree with me on the need to concentrate on jobs, education, local services, and if we can, I'm sure we can work constructively together.
Is that a general enough answer to you, Stephen, or did you want something more specific?
Is there a specific element to one of those three?
Give us one thing that's non-negotiable, Tavish Scott.
No, I'm not. Well, we okay. Let me do with the police.
Wants.
No. Well, we discuss the police. I think that's maybe the fairest example to give. I just don't think that removing police constables from Paisley or any other part of Scotland just to cause some enormous bureaucratic upheaval in terms of how we structure police in Scotland will achieve one bit of what we need to do in terms of cutting crime. So that's not something I would support.
Stephen, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's made an attempt to answer it anyway. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for your direct question, Stephen. We've got another call come through, 0845 500 1152. Oh, still time to squeeze some more in. Francis McCormick's on the line from Edinburgh. Francis, what's your question?
Well, I'm very sorry that Mr. Scott is against mandatory sentences, but I feel he should be in place for crimes against old age pensioners. I'm one myself. My father, when he was alive, was a victim of one or two crimes committed by bogus workmen. And I feel that these crimes are very, what's the word again, very dangerous to old age pensioners.
What mandatory sentence would you put on them, Francis? Francis, what mandatory sentence?
Scott in favour of a mandatory sentence on murder.
Right, but what mandatory sentence would you put on crimes against old people?
Well, it would be an extra penalty. That's what it would be.
Right, so it would be like an aggravation.
If it was a £10 fine, it would be a £20 fine if it was against an old age pensioner.
Tavish Scott, should old people be treated in the same way as, for example, racist incidents, homophobic incidents?
Yeah, I think when a court is making a judgment over how over a crime and the impact on the victim of that crime, they should take into account all the circumstances. So where it affects an older person, someone who is a pensioner, I would very much want to see the system ensuring that that was taken into account when a court is passing a verdict on a crime and sentencing the person then convicted of that crime. So it's surely right that the court would take into account the circumstances of the particular crime that Francis may be describing.
Thanks for your call, Francis. Sandy Ballingall's on the line from Elgin. Sandy, what's your question to Tavish Scott?
Good morning, Tavish.
Good morning, sir.
My question is, what is your view on the possibility of scrapping all nuclear weapons in this country, which is about the size of Norway, who do not have any submarines, and saving billions of pounds to the economy?
I agree with you, and I've long held the view, as has my party, that we should not have Trident. We shouldn't have a nuclear deterrent, because I'm not quite sure who we deter in the modern world.
Exactly. America's got enough to blow up the whole world.
Yes, and I think the argument's moved on since the Cold War, when we all apparently had to have these nuclear weapons, and I just think now, particularly in the financial situation we're in, we should negotiate those internationally away. I don't think that weakens our country in any way whatsoever, but it does and would in the longer term, not immediately, but in the longer term, save us money we could spend on things that are important to you and me.
Isn't that another one where you disagree with your colleagues down south, then, Tavish Scott?
No, the party does want to get rid of Trident and not replace it. Might be a better way to do it, and they've made sure that no money's being spent on that now. Unfortunately, Labour started a process which does spend money on a new nuclear deterrent. I don't agree with that, and neither does the party, and I hope we can make sure that doesn't happen.
Tavish, what's your biggest selling point of this election, do you think?
I just think it's very important to concentrate on jobs and on the issues that matter to people. I mean, I take the point earlier on from our caller who said none of us live in the real world. I think that's a fairly reasonable charge to target on all politicians. So let's see what we can do to make a difference to real people's lives in the really tough and challenging times we live in. But for me, the campaign and the arguments should be about the economy, creating jobs and making sure we give people hope for the future.
And despite your disagreements with Nick Clegg, are we going to see him up campaigning alongside you during this campaign?
He's due to be here in the campaign, so he'll be here at some stage.
Because he seems to have been airbrushed out of the campaign so far, except by annoying people like me asking you about him.
No, you're quite entitled to ask about him, and you will, and that's your job. But I mean, I think this is a Scottish election, so forgive me. I really want to concentrate on the issues that all your callers have raised today about Scotland and about the jobs we need, this educational system we need, and making sure we keep our local police.
And finally, what makes you cry?
You mean kicking the shins when playing football with my sons? I suppose that would be the nearest thing.
Peeling an onion. But Nick Clegg cries to music. I suspect it's maybe not all he cries to these days if he reads the opinion polls. Yeah. What makes you cry?
Honestly, I'm struggling to do the crying question on this one, and it is the honest answer on this one is when my 11-year-old wallops me in the shins when he's supposedly meant to have kicked the ball.
Is that because you're just too manly?
It's because it hurts.
Right. Well, before you go, in that case, when can we see Nick Clegg up in this campaign? Very quickly, because you've said he's coming up. You haven't told us when. Is he coming up next week? Is he in charge of the country next week since David Cameron's away flying Ryanair somewhere?
Is he? Sure, I thought Cameron came back on EasyJet today or something. Something like that. I don't know. No, he's up during the campaign, but I know this isn't a very convincing argument because he's now the Deputy Prime Minister. There's lots of security people who hang around him, and they're not allowed to say when he'll be here, but he will be here.
But you're not going to blame him if you don't do well in this election?
No, I'm not. I don't think blaming anyone is the right way to approach politics.
That's all we have time for this morning. Thanks for all your calls. Thanks to Lib Dem leader Tavish Scott for taking them and dealing with them all so well.